She entered the courtroom as a single black mother seeking justice, but left it as a symbol of resilience. Humiliated by a racist judge who thought she was powerless, she unveiled a truth so shocking it flipped the courtroom upside down. What happened next is a story of triumph you'll never forget. The courthouse loomed over the bustling downtown street like a symbol of power, intimidating, unwelcoming. For Monica Hayes, a single black mother juggling 2 jobs to support her 10-year-old son, this wasn't just another building. Today it represented hope and fear, justice and oppression. She clutched a worn-out folder to her chest as she climbed the courthouse steps, her heart pounding against her ribs. Inside that folder were years of her life, proof of wrongful eviction from her apartment, evidence of racial bias from her landlord, and the last remnants of her dignity. With no lawyer willing to take her case due to its complexity, Monica had decided to represent herself, armed with nothing but her resolve and the unshakable love for her son, Jamal. Her hands trembled as she walked into the courtroom. The sharp tap of her heels against the cold, tiled floor echoed in the silence. Heads turned briefly before disinterest set in again, but she felt the weight of their stares. Dressed in a second-hand blazer that didn't quite fit, Monica adjusted her collar nervously. Seated at the judge's bench was Charles Whitman, an older man with an icy demeanor. His silver hair glinted under the courtroom lights, but it was his cold blue eyes that froze Monica in place. Judge Whitman had a reputation for being tough, a code word Monica knew for dismissive and biased, especially against people like her. As her name was called, she stood and approached the podium. Voice quivered as she began, "Your Honor, I'm here today to appeal an eviction notice issued unfairly by my landlord." Before she could finish, Judge Whitman raised his hand, silencing her. "Let's get one thing clear," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a court of law, not a place for emotional pleas. Stick to the facts." Monica swallowed hard. Emotional pleas? She hadn't even begun explaining her case, yet she already felt dismissed. Palms grew sweaty as she fumbled with her papers, trying to organize her thoughts. I have evidence here," she continued, holding up her folder. "Photos, emails, and documentation showing a pattern of discrimination." Judge Whitman cut her off again, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Miss Hayes, I suggest you save your time and mine. This sounds like another baseless attempt to blame others for your situation. Landlords don't evict tenants for no reason." The words hit her like a slap. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Monica's eyes darted to the audience. Some whispered, others smirked, but most simply stared in uncomfortable silence. She tightened her grip on the folder, fighting back tears. Her son, Jamal, flashed in her mind, a boy who looked up to her as his protector, his anchor. "I can't break now. Not for him." She squared her shoulders, taking a deep breath. "Your Honor, if you'll allow me, I can present." Judge Whitman slammed his gavel, the sound reverberating through the room. "I've heard enough," he snapped, his voice laced with irritation. "This court doesn't have time to entertain sob stories." Monica froze. Her voice caught in her throat. The humiliation was overwhelming. She could feel the tears welling up, but she blinked them away, refusing to let him see her break. She glanced at the audience again, hoping, praying that someone might speak up, but no one did. The judge leaned forward, his tone dripping with finality. "Unless you have something of actual substance to present, I suggest you prepare to vacate your home." The courtroom was silent, save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Monica's heart sank. For a moment, she felt utterly defeated, the weight of systemic racism and years of struggle crashing down on her all at once. But then, something inside her shifted. A quiet fire ignited in her chest, a reminder of who she was and what she had accomplished to get here. Judge Whitman had no idea who he was dealing with. Monica straightened her spine, clutching the podium with trembling hands. The humiliation from the judge's words burned in her chest, but it also sparked a defiance she hadn't felt in years. She refused to let her son, Jamal, see her crumble, not after everything they had endured. "Your Honor," she said, her voice now steady but laced with determination. "I am prepared to present my case in full. I ask for the same respect and consideration that anyone else in this courtroom would receive." Judge Whitman arched an eyebrow, a mocking smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Respect, Miss Hayes?" he drawled. Respect is earned, not demanded, and so far I see nothing here to warrant it. The words stung, but Monica didn't flinch this time. Instead, she reached into her folder, pulling out a stack of documents and laying them neatly on the podium. Hands moved with precision, each motion deliberate. Your Honor, these documents outline clear evidence of racial discrimination from my landlord, she said firmly. Emails, denied repair requests, and notices that were only issued after I raised concerns about living conditions. If you'll take the time to review them, I'll be the judge of what's relevant, Whitman interrupted, his tone dismissive. He leaned back in his chair, waving a hand as if to brush her off entirely. But I highly doubt anything you've brought here will change my decision. Monica's stomach churned, but she refused to back down. She could feel the eyes of the courtroom on her, some filled with pity, others with quiet amusement, and a few with disdain. Yet amid the chaos, she stood firm. Taking a deep breath, Monica raised her head and looked directly at the judge, her voice unwavering. With all due respect, Your Honor, I believe my qualifications allow me to assess what is relevant in this matter. The courtroom grew still. Judge Whitman furrowed his brow, his eyes narrowing. Qualifications? He repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. Monica nodded, her confidence growing. Yes, Your Honor. While I entered this courtroom today as a single mother fighting for justice, I am also an attorney with over a decade of experience in civil rights law. Gasps rippled through the room, a wave of shock silencing the murmurs that had filled the air moments before. Even the stenographer paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. Judge Whitman's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. An attorney? He asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. Yes, Monica replied, her voice steady and clear. A graduate of Howard University School of Law, where I graduated with honors. I've argued cases in federal courts across this country, and last month, I was sworn in as the new Attorney General for this state. The silence in the room was deafening. Judge Whitman's jaw tightened, his face turning pale as he absorbed her words. The audience exchanged wide-eyed glances, whispers spreading like wildfire. Monica took a step back from the podium, letting her words settle. Her heart was pounding, but outwardly, she was the picture of calm authority. She met the judge's stunned gaze head-on, refusing to waver. Whitman's mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came. His hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly, the mask of arrogance cracking under the weight of the revelation. Monica continued, her voice cutting through the tension. I chose not to disclose my position earlier because I wanted this court to see me as every other citizen seeking justice, not as someone defined by a title. But your treatment of me today, Your Honor, has shown a clear disregard for fairness and respect, not just toward me, but toward anyone who looks like me or doesn't fit your idea of who deserves justice. The judge's face reddened, and for the first time that morning, he seemed at a loss for words. Monica turned to the audience, her voice filled with quiet strength. How many others have stood here before me, silenced and dismissed, simply because they didn't fit this court's expectations? How many were denied justice because they lacked the resources or the voice to fight back? The murmurs in the room grew louder, and Monica could see a shift in the crowd. People sitting straighter, nodding in agreement, their faces alight with newfound courage. Turning back to the judge, she delivered the final blow. Your Honor, I came here today to stand up not just for myself, but for every single person who has been humiliated, disrespected, or denied fairness in this courtroom. And I will not allow it to continue. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Whitman's once confident posture now seemed stiff, his face a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and anger. He adjusted his glasses, fumbling with the papers on his desk as if searching for something to anchor himself. Monica, standing tall at the podium, could feel the tide in the courtroom beginning to shift. For the first time, the whispers from the audience weren't filled with doubt or pity, but with awe. A murmur from the back of the room grew louder, a ripple of support. She's the Attorney General, someone whispered, their voice tinged with disbelief. Unbelievable. Did you see his face when she said it? Another murmured. Judge Whitman raised his gavel and banged it loudly, his attempt to regain control sounding more like a desperate plea. Order! Order in the court! He barked, his voice cracking under the weight of the moment. The room fell silent. But it was a different kind of silence, one charged with anticipation. Everyone could feel it. The balance of power had shifted. Whitman cleared his throat, attempting to steady his voice. Miss Hayes, Attorney General Hayes, while your credentials are impressive, they do not exempt you from the rules and procedures of this court. Monica tilted her head slightly, her calm gaze fixed on the judge. Your Honor, I agree. The rules and procedures of this court are here to ensure fairness and justice for all. But today, I have not seen those principles upheld. Instead, I've witnessed a clear display of bias and condescension toward me and likely toward countless others who have stood here before me. The audience erupted into murmurs once again, a few people nodding emphatically. A middle-aged black man in the front row folded his arms and said loudly, "She's not wrong. It's about time someone said it." The judge shot the man a sharp glare but didn't dare address him. Instead, he turned back to Monica, his voice strained. This court does not operate on emotion or spectacle, Attorney General. If you have evidence to present, you may proceed, but I will remind you to maintain decorum. Monica took a step forward, her presence commanding the room. With all due respect, Your Honor, decorum was lost the moment you dismissed me before I even had a chance to speak, but I will proceed, because justice demands it. She held up the stack of documents, her voice firm and clear. Here, I have undeniable proof of racial discrimination by my landlord, including emails where he referred to me and my son using derogatory language. I also have multiple maintenance requests that were ignored, while white tenants in the same building received prompt service. And this, she said, holding up a final sheet, is a recording of a conversation where my landlord explicitly stated he wanted to evict me because he didn't want people like us lowering the property value. Gasps rippled through the room. Judge Whitman's face turned ashen. He opened his mouth to speak but seemed to think better of it. Monica turned to face the audience, her voice rising with conviction. This is what I've been dealing with for years, and this is what so many others face every single day, not just from landlords, but from employers, educators, and yes, even from those sitting in positions of power in this very courtroom. The room was silent, but it wasn't the oppressive silence from earlier. It was the kind of silence that comes when truth crashes through the walls of denial and apathy. Judge Whitman shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Attorney General Hayes, if these documents are as you claim, the court will review them thoroughly. However, I will not allow my integrity to be called into question. Monica interrupted, her voice calm but cutting. Your Honor, this isn't about questioning your integrity. It's about accountability. If this court truly values justice, then it must begin by examining its own biases and how they impact the lives of those who come here seeking help. A young woman in the back of the courtroom stood up, her voice trembling but strong. She's right. This court hasn't been fair for a long time. Another man chimed in. Yeah, we've all seen it. Someone finally said what we've been thinking. The murmurs grew louder, swelling into a chorus of agreement. Judge Whitman pounded his gavel again, but this time it was clear he'd lost control of the room. Monica stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding. She glanced at the audience, catching sight of a young black woman wiping away tears and an elderly man nodding in quiet solidarity. For the first time, Monica felt the overwhelming power of her voice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced before her. Judge Whitman leaned forward, his voice strained. The court will take a brief recess while I review the evidence presented. But Monica knew the damage was done. The courtroom had seen the truth, and there was no going back. The courtroom was abuzz with murmurs, even as Judge Whitman retreated to his chambers. Visibly rattled, Monica remained at the podium, her chin held high, though her heart still beat furiously in her chest. The energy in the room had changed. No longer was it filled with doubt or derision. Instead, there was respect and even awe. From her spot at the front, Monica turned to glance at the audience. The faces of those who had once watched her with pity now bore admiration, some even nodding silently in her direction. A middle-aged black man in a worn denim jacket raised his fist subtly in a gesture of solidarity. Monica's gaze softened, and for the first time all day, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. The bailiff announced a 15-minute recess, but no one left their seats. The tension was too thick, the moment too charged. Monica returned to her table, where she began neatly organizing the documents she had presented, her movements calm and methodical despite the emotions swirling inside her. From the corner of her eye, she saw a woman approach cautiously. She was in her 30s, with tired eyes and a toddler balanced on her hip. "Excuse me," the woman whispered, her voice shaky but earnest. "I just wanted to say..." Thank you for what you said in there. I've been in this court before and it's not easy. Seeing you stand up like that, it means a lot. Monica smiled warmly, reaching out to touch the woman's hand. Thank you. That's why I'm here. Not just for myself, but for all of us. The woman nodded, her eyes glassy with unshed tears, before stepping back into the crowd. Monica's resolve hardened. This isn't just about me, she thought. This is about everyone who has been silenced, humiliated, or dismissed. The bailiff called the courtroom to order, just as Judge Whitman re-entered, his expression noticeably more subdued. He avoided Monica's gaze as he took his seat, clearing his throat before addressing the room. This court has reviewed the evidence presented by Attorney General Hayes, he began, his voice quieter, almost hesitant. The documents and recordings undeniably establish a pattern of racial discrimination by the landlord in question. Therefore, the eviction notice issued against Ms. Hayes is hereby nullified. A collective gasp of relief and triumph swept through the room, followed by scattered applause. Monica remained seated, her face calm but her chest swelling with pride. Judge Whitman raised his gavel, signaling for silence. Furthermore, he continued, this court will forward these findings to the state's housing authority for further investigation. Discrimination of this nature has no place in our community. The applause grew louder, defying the judge's call for order. Monica allowed herself a small smile, but she wasn't done. She stood, addressing the bench, with the same quiet strength she'd carried throughout the ordeal. Thank you, Your Honor, for making the right decision today, she began, her tone measured but firm. But I must address what led us to this moment. The way I was treated when I first entered this courtroom, before my evidence was even reviewed, is unacceptable. No one seeking justice should feel humiliated or dismissed based on their appearance, background, or circumstances. Judge Whitman's face darkened, but he said nothing. Monica turned to the audience, her voice rising. This isn't just about one case or one person. It's about the culture in this room, the bias that has gone unchecked for far too long. Today we've taken a step toward justice, but there's more work to be done. And I promise you, every single one of you, I will be here to see that work through. The room erupted into cheers, the energy palpable. Monica scanned the crowd, her eyes landing on her son, Jamal, who had been sitting quietly in the back. His small hands clapped furiously, his face glowing with pride. For a fleeting moment, her composure cracked, and tears filled her eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness or humiliation. They were tears of triumph, of knowing that she had not only fought for herself, but had become a voice for so many others. As the crowd continued to cheer, Judge Whitman sat stiffly, his authority diminished. He tapped his gavel once more, muttering, "Court is adjourned," before quickly retreating to his chambers. In the hallway outside, Monica was greeted by a line of people waiting to thank her. Some shook her hand. Others shared their own stories of mistreatment in the justice system. Each word of gratitude filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. As she stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, Jamal ran up to her, wrapping his arms tightly around her waist. "You did it, Mom," he said, looking up at her with wide, admiring eyes. She knelt down, cupping his face in her hands. "We did it, Jamal," she replied, "because no matter how hard it gets, we stand tall. Always." They walked down the courthouse steps together, surrounded by a small crowd of supporters. For Monica, this wasn't just a victory. It was the beginning of a movement, a promise to ensure that justice wasn't reserved for the privileged, but a right for everyone. Weeks passed, but the echoes of Monica's stand in that courtroom reverberated far beyond its walls. Her case became the talk of the town, and eventually made headlines in newspapers and on social media. Attorney General stands up to racist judge in shocking courtroom showdown became a rallying cry for those seeking justice and equality. The video of the court proceedings, filmed discreetly by a spectator, went viral, amassing millions of views. People from all walks of life commented on Monica's courage, praising her poise under pressure, and the powerful way she dismantled systemic racism in real time. But for Monica, the attention was secondary to the change she hoped to inspire. Judge Whitman, once untouchable in his position, found himself under intense scrutiny. Complaints about his biased rulings, once ignored, were now being reopened and investigated. Monica's testimony sparked an internal review of his conduct, with many former plaintiffs and defendants stepping forward to share their experiences. The State Judiciary Board launched an inquiry into his rulings, uncovering a disturbing pattern of favoritism and discrimination. Within months, Whitman resigned, citing personal reasons. But everyone knew the truth. He had been forced out, his career shattered by the very bias he once wielded unchecked. For Monica, it wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. "It's not enough to remove one bad actor," she said during a press conference. "We must build a system that prevents these injustices from happening in the first place." True to her word, Monica turned her courtroom victory into a platform for change. As the newly sworn-in Attorney General, she launched an initiative to reform the state's judicial system, focusing on implicit bias training, transparency in courtroom proceedings, and accessible legal resources for underprivileged communities. She partnered with advocacy groups to create a hotline for reporting judicial misconduct, and worked tirelessly to pass legislation aimed at increasing oversight of judges statewide. "No one should walk into a courtroom feeling like they've already lost," she said at the initiative's launch event. The community embraced her efforts, and Monica quickly became a beacon of hope for those who had long felt powerless. Her story inspired others to speak out, leading to broader conversations about equity in the legal system and beyond. Amid the whirlwind of change, Monica never forgot why she had fought so hard in the first place. Her son, Jamal. Their lives were different now. No longer burdened by the threat of eviction, they had found stability and even joy in their modest home. One evening, as Monica tucked Jamal into bed, he looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mum, when I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to help people." Her heart swelled with pride as she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You already help people, Jamal. Every time you stand up for what's right, no matter how scary it is, you're making a difference." Jamal smiled, his eyes beginning to close. "Like you did in court." Monica leaned down, kissing his forehead. "Exactly like that," she whispered. Monica's story continued to inspire. Schools invited her to speak to students about the power of resilience and standing up against injustice. Law students across the country studied her case, calling it a turning point in the fight against systemic racism in the judicial system. Her initiative sparked similar programs in other states, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond her own community. Though the road ahead was long, Monica felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing she had sparked real, lasting change. On the anniversary of her courtroom battle, Monica was invited back to the same courthouse to speak at a community event celebrating judicial reform. Standing on the steps where she had once felt so small and alone, she now faced a crowd of hundreds, people of all races, ages, and backgrounds, united in their pursuit of justice. "As I stood here a year ago, I was just a mother fighting to keep a roof over my son's head," she began, her voice carrying over the crowd. "I never imagined that moment would become a movement. But this isn't just my story, it's ours. Together, we proved that one voice, no matter how small, can echo loudly enough to shake even the most unyielding walls." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause a powerful reminder of what Monica had achieved. As she stepped down from the podium, Jamal ran to her side, gripping her hand tightly. She looked down at him, smiling. "Ready to go, kiddo?" He grinned up at her. "Always, Mum." Together they walked down the steps of the courthouse, the sun setting behind them. It wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a new legacy, one built on courage, resilience, and the unwavering belief that justice belongs to everyone.